Okay, good morning members. Welcome to the November meeting of Policy and Resources Committee. Just like to remind everyone that the meeting will be recorded and the recording made available for public listening. Fairly full agenda this morning, and I intend to make brisk progress through it given that the temperature is not any better than it seems to be at this time of year. Rona, can you give us a Sederunt and apologies, please?
Yes, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Brodie. As we start the meeting, Councillors Charteris, Fairbairn and Ingalls are not present. Apologies. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest. Would any member wish to make a declaration of interest? Stop laughing, Councillor Ferguson. No. In that case, we'll move on to the minute of the meeting of 14th September 2017. This minute is for approval, and I am happy to move.
Seconded.
Members, we agreed? Item 4 is the 2018 review of UK Parliamentary Constituencies and public consultation on revised proposals. Members will be aware that the Boundary Commission for Scotland has been consulting on the 2018 review of the UK Parliamentary Constituencies, and that this committee responded to the initial proposals in November 2016. The response we made is set out in paragraph 3.3 of the report today. Comments gathered from a secondary consultation earlier this year and published by the committee were provided to this, published by the Commission, I should say, were provided to this committee at a meeting on 16th March 2017. The Commission has now prepared revised proposals after considering responses to its consultations, and a summary of what the Commission now proposes is provided at paragraph 3.8. This report presents us with the opportunity to consider these revised proposals and make comment on them. And I will simply open this straight up to member comment. Councillor Johnson.
It's actually with regard to the Galloway and Dumfries proposal. It's quite good, I think, that we've got the whole of Dumfries in this. The only concern that I would have really is actually just simply the name, Galloway and Dumfries. I think it should really be left as Dumfries and Galloway. We have the situation at the moment where we have the Scottish constituency of Galloway and West Dumfries, and I think that could potentially lead to a bit of confusion. I think a lot of the public are a wee bit confused about our government structures at the best of times as it is. So that is really the only comment I would like to make. I mean, it is consistent with Dumfries and Galloway Council. Next week in EEI, we've got a matter coming up regarding a Dumfries and Galloway branding thing. I think sticking to Dumfries and Galloway just makes sense.
I think potentially members from the west of the region might take a different view on this one, but I'm not sure that we necessarily want to argue too much about which way round the name falls. Although I guess there's a counter argument that Galloway and Dumfries would also align to some extent with Galloway and West Dumfries, but there are, I guess, two sides to this story. Do any other members wish to comment on this? Councillor Dryburgh.
Thanks, yeah. And I think from the input that we had, a lot of the suggestions we shared have actually been taken forward by the Boundary Commission. I can understand Councillor Johnson's issue with the Dumfries and Galloway thing, sort of with the Made in Dumfries and Galloway thing coming up at EE&I next week. But as you say, there might be people across in the West who might disagree with that as well, and they would want their name first as well. I'm not going to argue in any way whatsoever, but I think a lot of the issues that we raised have actually been taken on board by the Boundary Commission. Certainly
agree with that point. It's not always that the Boundary Commission takes that view, I have to say, so I think we should welcome that, and I don't want it to sound too... Elaine.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I'm pleased to see that the views of the Council were taken into account by the Boundary Commission. I think that's very satisfying. On the issue of the name, I think there is also a counter-argument, though, that calling the seat Dumfries and Galloway as it is at present gives the impression that that MP represents the whole of Dumfries and Galloway rather than just Dumfries in the West. So in some senses, that calling it Galloway and Dumfries might actually give a more accurate representation of what the constituency boundary really is.
Jane?
I absolutely take what the leader's saying. I think that's a sensible way forward. Do you know, there is another argument to say why you should always divide a large centre such as Dumfries between two areas, two constituencies. It means that these members feel that they are responsible. So you get there's an element of getting double the lobbying abilities. So you know, it's not an issue here, but it's just something to take into account.
Okay, thank you for that. Have we any other members? Okay, in that case, we'll turn to the recommendations. What I would say is I'm not sure that we necessarily have agreement on making further comment as a council with regard to the name of the Western constituency, but it is entirely open to any political group, any political party, and any individual member, or indeed member of the public, to make further comment as they see fit. So, turning to the recommendations, at 2.1 we are happy to note, I take it. And at 2.2, do we have any proposals formally to comment further as a council? Are we content to leave that then for individuals or groups? Councillor Carruthers?
I was going to say, I think you're right. If we're agreeing 2.2, if it's reflected in the minutes that the comments that have been made are reflected there in some way, then that goes far enough. You're right in regards to political groups and so on and so forth. But there's some kind of recognition there that there was discussion and comments in regards to it.
Okay, and we can do that. That's absolutely fine. In that case, we'll take that all as agreed. Thank you. Moving then to item 5, which is Council Revenue Budget Monitoring 2017-18 for the period ended 30th September 2017. This report provides a summary of forecast expenditure for the Council up to the end of September 2017 and the measures being taken to manage budgets across services. It also provides a forecast of year-end general fund balances and funding available to support investment in required savings through the Change Fund. The report also provides a first progress update on delivery of the agreed savings, and officers have continued to highlight the challenges and risks associated with the unprecedented level of savings we have to achieve this year, potential impacts and mitigations of these risks. All measures are being taken to ensure our budget position is balanced for 2017-18. Gillian Ross is here to answer any questions on the report. Gillian, have you anything in particular that you would wish to add?
No, I think you've covered everything fine. Thank you.
Okay, it is a comprehensive report. Members, questions? Councillor Driver?
No, not so much a question, Chair, but a comment on the EE&I position. 6 weeks ago, we had that an envelope position of being just under £1 million, and an action plan was put in place, which the members of the EE&I committee will hear about next week. And I'm pleased to say that the position now is the projected outturn position now is under the £200,000. So the director and the heads of service have actually been working really hard to pull back on what they were trying to do in the first place, and hopefully it will not affect any of the services that they actually provide. But I have to say well done to those heads of service and for bringing it that low in that short space of time. But we need to continue to do that, and we are going to continue to do that and review that every week whilst I have a meeting with the director along with my vice chair. So I think the E&I position is coming back to where it should be thereabout for this budget year.
Appreciate the input, Councillor Driver, because it is, as you reflect, a substantially improved position to the numbers that are reported here. And I think certainly congratulations are due in terms of the very rapid progress that has been made to start to improve the situation. Councillor Nicholl.
Thanks, Chair. 3.8. There's a sentence here to consider an allocation from corporate resources. I think that's a decision that should be taken at a much later stage and only if absolutely essential. But what I was really wanting to mention was 3.13, the shortfall and the reduction in staff costs due to the significant majority of cases being applied to service specific. This is ERVS, is my understanding. Have we any indication of how many people? They're saying in here there are 42 active expressions. My understanding is from tittle-tattly here in the street, supposedly, that there are a lot more of people than that have expressed an interest. And I just wondered how we were progressing with those other interests of participation in this ERVS scheme.
Okay, thank you for that. I think in relation to the first point, you've explained very clearly what 3.8 is driving at. I think that clarification is useful. Lorna, if you'd like to take the second point.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholl, there are a number of people who asked to leave under the ERVS scheme where the services have not been able to release those people and business cases have not came forward, and that's substantially more than 40. I think it's around about 200 cases at this moment in time. Now that relates to reduction in service or reduction in activity, which there's no approval of council to proceed on. So the impact of those cases would have been a change to service, which members haven't agreed or decided on. Those cases, while have not progressed to business case, remain live, and we are looking at options about how we might bring that forward, particularly as members consider their budgets for future years in the next budget.
Councillor Nicholl, you wish to come back?
Just for clarification, so there are about 200 cases on the book, so to speak, but only 42 of them are being actively pursued. Is that a correct understanding of the situation?
I'll just clarify, it's actually 200 in addition to the 50 there, so it's an addition. So those cases are of roles and responsibilities such as people who are social workers, people who work with additional support for learning, but areas of business where the council has not sought to reduce activity and where there is a critical need in terms of risk. So those are areas where those need to be managed very, very carefully, and we're now re-looking at all of those cases as we work our way through that, because those are the people who have made a voluntary indication that they wish to seek a release from their role. So they remain live, but they're active work on 40 to 50 additional cases at the moment, which we would seek to try and proceed with over the next 2 to 3 months to finalise this year's budget.
Okay. Councillor Surtees.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that the 200 are being managed carefully, because I think sometimes if people wish to leave their posts and they're not able to, it can cause extra sickness in my experience, and it's about how we manage that so it doesn't impact on our efficiency.
Yeah, I think it's a very fair point. Councillor Maitland.
Yeah, it's 320. It's just really how we are treating this figure of 1.478. I'm really, I think, following on from Councillor Nicholl's point, described as an allowance for non-delivery of agreed savings, which is a jolly easy way of simply saying, right, we'll just stick in 1.48, we'll take it out of the change fund. And it's not that rigorous sounding, Chairman, just saying that it's an allowance for non-delivery of agreed savings. I think the public would simply say that's very interesting. You've got money which has been put into that change fund, which I always assumed actually was really to be almost a spend to save project, and really to simply say that it's an allowance for non-delivery agreed savings, I would think the public would find that quite difficult to understand.
I do always aspire to being rigorous enough for you, Councillor Maitland. But, Gillian, perhaps you would like to clarify.
Okay, just to reiterate, the process of creating an allowance for the delivery of agreed savings is part of an agreed approach in terms of when we're looking at the savings and monitoring throughout the year, that if there are indications that there may be delays in the timing of the delivery of the savings, such as the reduction in staff costs that we've just mentioned, that timing delay will be managed through the change fund. The change fund is primarily there for the delivery of savings on an ongoing basis, and it was recognised that there might be instances where a slight delay in the delivery of those may be required to be met on a one-off basis. So although that's there on it's a one-off contribution, it would be anticipated that those savings would be delivered on an ongoing basis. So it's a one-off contribution.
Thank you. So it's simply a matter of cash flow, we're saying, Chairman. Right. Okay. Thank you.
If that is helpful. Any other member? Councillor Thompson.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. It's just slightly touched on the same point. We've already had a bit of extra input about the EEI situation, and there's going to be something coming to the EEI committee in terms of measures being taken. So it's just to ensure that given that the 1.478 million identified in the change fund is for ongoing savings, and it's that allowance given the timing has just been mentioned, that's separate from departmental ones that are, say, to do with discretionary spend, which you wouldn't associate normally with recurring savings. So it's really just that that's clear. Obviously, I think I wouldn't go as far as congratulating. I'd probably be sort of saying, well, yes, we'll support and encourage you and move into the right direction, but at the end of the day, it's still a deficit. So I think congratulations would be in order once we've made that deficit zero. But otherwise, it's good to see that there's going to be a report coming to EEI. So it's really just that separation between ongoing staff savings as a revenue saving, and that's what the change fund's for, and that the EEI savings that's separate. Am I clear on that?
I believe I may have been gently chastised. However, thank you for that. Gillian, you might like to clarify?
Yep, the allocations in the change fund are specifically in relation to the three savings that are detailed within the page 27 of the report. It does include one EEI specific saving in relation to fleet and vehicle management, but that is not included within the overall forecast overspend included with EEI. So there's no double counting. It's anticipated if there, as we've stated at 3.8 of the report, the ongoing, there might be a requirement to review an ongoing allocation to the service once we've fully committed and reviewed the action plan, and that money would come from the budget pressures allowance that's currently unallocated if there was a requirement to do that. So they're completely separate.
That's perfect, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, for letting me back in. I'm now able to decipher some of the scribblings in my page here, and I'm back at 3.13. 42 active expressions of interest are being reviewed. How long does it take to review these, and how long does it take to from start to finish of this process?
Lorna, one for you, I think.
The indication is that if members have agreed a saving, then that can be done very quickly. Where members have not agreed savings from a service, then there has to be a lot of work done to decipher whether the release of that member of staff will impact on activity and service delivery. And that can take a short time or a longer time, depending on the complexity of the role, the activity they undertake, and the critical nature of the role. It's very, very difficult, particularly when you're dealing with some of the services where members have not indicated any reduction in service. So to be able to release somebody means that the activity that that person carries out has to be displaced, and we need to manage that, and the trade unions have been very clear with us about that as well in terms of workload and management, etc. So it can be very challenging, and every case is unique to an extent. But what I would say is, in terms of the 40, some of these are cases where people in the last month have indicated they wish to leave and indicated the release, and we're actively pursuing. So we try to curtail the length of time and uncertainty for people, because we understand it's a life change for them as much as anything else.
Yeah, is that helpful, Councillor Nicholl? Okay, any other member? Okay, so I'll move to the recommendations. Members, are we content to note 2.1 through 2.4? Thank you. Item 6 is the Capital Investment Strategy Monitoring 2718 for the period ended 30th September 2017. This report gives members information on the progress so far on the Council's capital investment strategy for current financial year. As at the end of September, the Council had spent nearly 30 million of the 76 million programme for this year. It's a vital contribution to our support for the local economy and delivers projects which are integral to our Council's priorities. given that I live in Dalbeattie, you will forgive me for mentioning that we very recently saw the opening of the fantastic new learning campus, which I would just remind members was delivered on time and on budget. And I would take as an excellent example of the clear benefit and the product of the substantial ongoing investments in our communities and facilities which are being made by this council. The overall funding of the investment strategy and the progress of the approved programmes within that strategy are reflected in the report, including updates on profiling of expenditure on large projects and also more detailed information on agreed projects within approved programmes themselves within the individual asset classes. Gemma Lowry is here to answer questions. Gemma, have you anything specific to add to the report? Okay, I will therefore open that to members. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks very much for letting me in. As I was reading through this, I'll just try and describe, I've got 2 or 3 points to make, Chairman, if that's okay, or questions even. And on page 33 in paragraph 3.2, it refers to the previous full council meeting and a decision regarding the refurbishment works on DG1. And what I've wrote here is when will DG1 figures be available, but I'll allude to appendix as I went through the report. This is the points I'm noting down as I went through the report, and maybe that is outlined on page 37, near the middle of that table, but maybe get that clarified, Chairman, if that's the case. It looks like that's what it is. Also on 3.5, which is on page 34, it talks about, because of the white sands being called in by the Scottish Government, there will be further impacts on the spending profile. Could you just have those outlined and just so we're absolutely aware of what they are? And it also talks about, I think it's 455k from memory, but I'll just see if I can find it, I think that's correct, £455,000 on the Dumfries Fibre Network. Just remind us what that was. I couldn't see it within the papers anywhere. What impact is that? What exactly what was that, if you can hear me okay, Chairman?
Okay, can hear you absolutely fine, thank you. There I take there to be 3 big questions, if you can assist.
I'll take the first 2, but the third question, Graham will need to field that particular one. In terms of DG1, what we have done at the moment is we have reflected the increase in the budget as it was agreed. However, we are still waiting a more detailed profile of that expenditure, so it will be subject to further revision when we have that information. But at the moment, it is all included in terms of the allocation that was made. In terms of the second question on the flood protection schemes, an update was provided to Scottish Government on Friday as to the profiling of that information, and there'll be a further update brought to EEI committee next week on that particular issue, and it will also be updated in the next iteration of the capital investment strategy monitoring to reflect those more up-to-date spend profiles.
In relation to question 3, the Dumfries Fibre Network, it's a joint venture with the Dumfries and Galloway Health Board to implement an infrastructure to support resilience between both our data centres and to enable the joint working that's going to be necessary for shared services in the future. It's allowing us to reduce our planned capital expenditure. The secondary data centre in Carruthers House is end of life. We'll need a significant investment. What we've done, we've put a reciprocal arrangement in place with the Health Board, so they will host our disaster recovery centre and we will host theirs, and it's that Dumfries Fibre Network that enables that to happen.
Councillor Carruthers, you wish to come back?
Please, aye. Thank you very much, Chairman. I suppose in regards to Graham's first, I wonder what the contribution was from the health side of things. Was it a bigger package, or was it just the council actually bought into this, just in regards to shared services? And I think, Chairman, from the answer we got from Gemma in regards to the DG1, I think we need to be absolutely clear in regards to, we've took a position, previous council decisions in regards to confidentiality, make sure that we're absolutely adhering to them, and I think it may well be the case, but it's very similar figures to figures we've discussed earlier. So I think we should. I think it's right. I make the council aware of that through on the back of that answer.
Graham, you wish to come back?
Yeah, it's a 50-50 split, cost-wise, with the Health Board. Both organisations were needing a new disaster recovery centre, and the equivalent costs would have been approximately the same. So we created the package and just split it 50-50.
Okay, thank you for that. Your point regarding confidentiality and the aspects of what is going on with DG1 that ought to remain confidential is, I think, well made. Any other members? Councillor Maitland.
Just want to say that we finally appear to be moving on the Dumfries asset issue. I think I just want to say thank you to Louise because it was a recumbent elephant and it wouldn't move, and finally it has. And I'm certainly being told that the staff are very, very pleased with how it's working in Cargan Towers and in Irish Street. So I think that's something which we should actually say is good news. But I still want more savings.
I think you make a very good point regarding the Dumfries asset strategy, and I have to say I am somewhat envious of Irish Street. I think it's fantastic. It's a very, very good working environment, and I'm delighted to hear that staff are enjoying it and finding that it helps them. I think it's been a very good piece of work, actually. Any other members? Okay, in that case, we'll move to recommendations. Are we content to note 2.1 through 2.4? Thank you. Item 7 is the implementation of Financial Code 11 debt write-offs. This report provides details of debt written off under delegated authority to officers over the 6-month period to 30th September 2017. We now receive summary information of all write-offs, that is monies which are deemed uncollectible, every 6 months, and we are also provided with more detail on all write-offs which have a value greater than £10,000. Members will note that the vast majority of sums owed to the Council are collected, and I am pleased to note that the collection levels for Council tax and non-domestic rates, highlighted in paragraph 3.2, provide a very strong indication of this. I gather we may in fact be the highest performing Council in Scotland with regard to at least one of these measures, which is excellent. Services carry out extensive work before recommending sums are considered for write-off. And paragraph 3.5 of the report sets out the reasons where officers may recommend write-offs. So Lindsay Wilson's here to speak to the report, and I will open it to members' questions. Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, good news story, hopefully. We are one of the better ones, if not the best, council in Scotland for collection of such things. But if you add up the two write-offs, it comes to £453,000. It's difficult to sell that to the general public when we're going about community councils and out in the wider world there, pleading that we're going to have to save 17.5 million next year and maybe 50 million over the next 3 years. It's difficult to justify throwing away £500,000 before you start. But a note that we've got write-ons on the last page over in 3.15. Are there any of those is there any of that 453,000 could be a write-on in future times? Are we still pursuing the people whom we've, you know, that these are the write-offs are at the moment? Are we still pursuing them, and can some of that be recouped at a later stage?
I'm glad you mentioned the write-ons, because I think it's important that we reflect that there is a balance in this as well. I think sometimes it's up to us to make the difficult arguments based on the facts rather than the populist position. But perhaps you wish to clarify the situation regarding how we get to this point and also the situation for write-ons.
Thanks, Chair. I just really like to stress to the committee that because we write off a debt, it doesn't mean that we don't pursue it if the circumstances change. And it's difficult to try and second guess what those circumstances will be, but if we get to a position where we believe that previously written off debt could be recollected, then we pursue with extreme vigour.
Okay. Members, any other questions or comments? Councillor Lever.
Just in terms of what Lindsay was saying about continuing to pursue write-offs, I think we should recognise that in the recommendations that you know, it is due to the tenacity of the staff that we actually have been able to recover nearly £100,000 of income which has previously been written off.
I'm very happy to record that as an additional final recommendation. Members, any other questions or comments? Okay, well, in that case we'll turn to the Councillor Thompson, you're doing it again.
Beg your pardon, Chair. It was just, now that we've got once it's written off, effectively, although there's an active pursuit of when situations change to recover that as a right on, in terms of what we know is available to us in terms of setting a budget, for example, when something's written on, does it reappear as not new money, but as money that we would otherwise have thought we didn't have that is now available?
We're saying yes, that is the case. Elaine.
I suppose it's really just a bit of a little niggle, but in 3.12 refers to an error that DWP made of over £16,000, and unfortunately the council seems to have to accept the debt, even though it was not a mistake made by the council. And we've also got another 26,647 in overpaid benefit, which may indeed be something very similar. Is there no prospect whatsoever of pursuing the DWP to account for their mistakes?
Who would like to take that one?
I think in terms of these debts, we actually deal with benefits on an agency basis for the DWP. In these cases that are stated here, unfortunately we can't go back to the DWP. I mean, we've done so, we've questioned it, but ultimately we have to put it forward for write-off.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? In that case, we'll go to the recommendations. So we're happy to note 2.1, 2.1.1 and 2.1.2, and do we have a formal words for, effectively we wish to recognise the level of write-ons, is that right, Councillor Lee?
Well, what I've scribbled down here is to congratulate staff for their tenacity in the recovery of 96,576 of debt previously written off.
Sounds good to me. Are we content with that? Take it we are. Thank you. Item 8 is the Treasury Management Mid-Year Review 2017-18. Council is required to receive a Treasury Management Mid-Year Review setting out the Council's transactions and debt performance for the period to 30th September 2017. Andrew Ewart and Gemma Lowry are present to deal with any questions arising from the report. Is there anything particular that you would like to add, please?
Yes. I'd just like to draw members' attention to the fact that there has been an increase in the base rate recently, which you'll all be aware of. I think the key thing to highlight is that hasn't really impacted our long-term borrowing rates because those increases were priced in. Been a minimal impact on short-term borrowing rate. However, it is still cheaper to borrow temporary. So the current strategy of maximising our temporary debt in order to take advantage of that is still deemed to be appropriate. And just to reiterate that we do spread the risk of interest rate variation through the maturity profile of our debt.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Members, questions? Comments? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just on the last point about spreading the risk through the maturity profiles. So I was looking at page 71, where you can see in the first and second columns the difference between in the 10 and 15 years and the over 50 years columns, where there's, and similarly, 2 to 5 years. So you've got 2 million, 6 million, and 6 million differences there spread. I presume that's kind of what you're talking about when you're talking about spreading the risk over the maturity.
Yes, that's correct. So it's really when we time the debt so that we have to replace it, we spread that out so that if in any one particular year rates were particularly high, it wouldn't have such a significant impact on our overall borrowing. That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I just check in relation to the increase to 20 million to 25 million? That's effectively an interim change in our policy to reflect what our operational practice has basically become, I take it.
Yes, that's correct. So we highlighted in the end of year report that we'd had a number of breaches of this particular limit with our own bank. They're quite minimal in the grand scheme of things, but it is due to the fact that the council is now receiving bigger cash inflows in particular, and the exact timing of those can be a little bit difficult to manage. So we're just looking for a temporary increase at the moment while we review this in more detail, and we would bring a more firm recommendation to yourselves for consideration as part of the 18-19 strategy document. This is purely for the remainder of this financial year.
Okay, thank you for that. It's very helpful. Elaine?
So just first of all, on the Public Works Loan Board, I mean, it used to be considered that we borrowed from that because it was cheaper, basically, than borrowing on the market. But I see in terms of, on page 60, on the long-term debt, the PWLB rates for fixed rates are considerably higher than the market rates. Does that just reflect the time at which the loans were taken out when the interest rate was higher than it is at present?
Yeah, so it's a combination of when that debt was taken, but also the duration of the debt tends to impact the rate. So debt that is taken over a longer cycle will tend to have a slightly higher rate. So, for example, 50-year to 10-year PWLB would be slightly different as well. But predominantly that is because we're replacing historic debt when rates were higher.
The other is just, I suppose, a matter of interest. I noticed that we have borrowed money from Renfrewshire Council. That seems to be on page 64 for a period of 2 years, but we've also appeared to have lent money to Nottingham City Council on page 67, although we unfortunately don't seem to be getting the same rate as we're paying to Renfrewshire. But this is fairly common practice for councils to lend each other money.
Yeah, I mean, the reason you'll notice that the money we borrowed from Renfrew is for a 2-year period, which is part of the long-term borrowing strategy. We've actually taken another loan from a local authority this week, so we're getting another £5 million coming in next week from another local authority. The £3 million which has been lent out to Nottingham is part of the temporary strategy, and it's just to manage temporary cash flows. As I said, we've increased, or we're proposing a temporary increase in the money we can keep within our own bank. So when we have surplus funds, rather than leaving it there, we're looking for other opportunities. We were in a position where we had surplus funds at the time, and we lent out for the 3-month period to Nottingham.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah. Andy just raised something there which made me wonder. Is this money that we're borrowing going into the capital account or the revenue account?
The loans fund doesn't specify capital or revenue. Basically, the loans fund operates as an internal bank for the council, and it funds both the capital account and the revenue account. Longer term borrowing tends to be for capital purposes, and the temporary debt tends to be for sort of revenue, cash flows, etc. Although there are times, as in at present, where we do utilise temporary debt as a means of funding the capital programme, but over the time that will be replaced by longer term debt as and when interest rates. But the loans fund itself doesn't specify capital or revenue.
Is that helpful?
Yes, that helps, Chair. Thanks very much. I could just come back to the 20 to 25 million on a temporary basis. Could you explain how temporary is?
We'd like to have that limit increased from now until the end of March next year. However, in the interim period between now and then, we would bring to you the 2018-19 Treasury Management Strategy, and as part of that, we would be bringing forward any changes that we needed to make that we felt were required to meet operational needs as part of that as well. So I would expect that to be one of the ones that is brought to you in the 18-19 strategy. The 20 million limit no longer meets our operational requirements, and the bank in question is sufficiently safe that it is appropriate to consider an increase in the limit. And we've done quite a bit of research so far, and a number of local authorities actually don't sometimes have a limit at all with their own bank account. So from a risk perspective, we're quite comfortable that would be appropriate and not present any real risk to ourselves to do that. But for now, it would be a 6-month period.
Could I just come back, Chair? So that temporary could acquire a degree of permanence within the next 6 months. That's what we're being told, I understand.
My understanding of that any degree of permanence would be subject to our agreement. Am I right in saying that? So 6 months unless we say otherwise. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. It's just a question on page 71. It's about the maturity profile. There's a jolly great big chunk of money, 5 to 10 years. And I keep remembering seeing that in a bar chart form and forgetting to ask about the implications and the risks. If you could just tell us what that actually is going to do to council planning.
The majority of that money, which is in the 5 to 10 year period, is as a result of debt rescheduling exercises we carried out several years ago, where we redeemed high coupon or high rate debt and replaced it with lower interest debt, and we fitted it into that period. We will be obviously monitoring that, and if there's any opportunities to reschedule the debt that's in there, we will take that opportunity. But if that doesn't become the case, then we will be take steps to ensure that when we come to cover that debt, we have got the money, and we won't be. It could be a case of taking money a couple of years earlier, a year earlier, or deferring it for a year. So we will be obviously monitoring that peak in the profile.
That helpful? Okay, any other member? In that case, we'll go to the recommendations. Are we content to note 2.1 and agree 2.2, particularly as it's been clarified it's for a 6-month period and comes back to us? Are we content? Good. Item 9 is the... Thank you very much. Item 9 is the commissioning and... the procurement and commissioning regular update, financial year 2017-18, quarter 2. This report provides an overview on the key procurement activities delivered during the second quarter of this year. It builds on the first report we received at our last committee meeting. The report highlights activity relating to procurement during this time and provides details of forthcoming opportunities and events for local suppliers. Quarterly update report aims to provide us with greater visibility of the Council's procurement activity. I welcome this, I have to say. I'm keen that this committee continues to contribute to the development of our approach to procurement. Karen Scott is available to answer any questions arising from the report. Is there anything particular that you'd like to add? Okay, members, questions, comments? Councillor Giusti.
Thanks, Chair. My question is just a quick one on Appendix 1, page 78. It's regarding the printers, MFDs and investment services. Their tender route is a mini competition. Could you put a bit of clarity onto that? I'm imagining people out on a golf course right now.
In terms of the mini competition, we're looking to use the national MFD framework agreement, which has got all the key players in Scotland that are actually appointed to that. So we'd be looking to actually specify what our local requirements are and invite all of those suppliers to quote for that work.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman. I mean, it's just for note today, and I mean, it's good to see this coming forward, and it is certainly a big improvement. I say that every time we see it now, and it's certainly good to see it here. Bullet point 3.2, the last bullet point, I think in particular, just refers to the lack of uptake in regards to the training and so on, which was available. Disappointing in regards to that, because of the potential impact it could have on the local economy. If we're doing everything we can to encourage, I think evenings, weekends, stuff like that as well. Obviously, small and medium-sized enterprises, their day job is to get out there, work their job and make money. So if we're doing that kind of stuff, and I think Councillor Giusti has covered the other point very well. But I think ultimately, there'll be a review taking this, because certainly for the audit and risk and scrutiny perspective, we take it very seriously because of the impact it can have on the local economy. We see some improvements potentially, but that'll come out through that review as it goes forward. But no, welcome this report. It is certainly a much better place than what we were previously.
Thank you for that. I mean, I do absolutely recognise where you're coming from in terms of engagement with local SMEs. I mean, it is a key priority for us. So, Karen, if you'd like to take that point, please.
The training events that we were referring to within the report were specifically for trades, and we do absolutely recognise the need that we absolutely need to make sure we continue to utilise our local trade suppliers. So we specifically ran the events across the region, either early morning or late in the evening, recognising the fact that they have a day job to do. So we've had, for some of the events, there was better attendance than others, but we have recognised that it's not been the success that we had hoped for. The procurement route we're taking for the trades specifically means it's not a closed door, so those that actually don't get on in the first round when the tender actually goes live later this month will still have an opportunity, and so we're going to continue to run those events on a sort of drop-in basis that will be opened up to not just trade suppliers but for any supplier across the region to come along, and we're supporting them to actually get registered onto the new tender system and providing them with some support around the standard ESPD pre-qualification document as well in terms of some of the terminology. So we're going to continue running those events, and we are trying to seek feedback at the moment from the suppliers that we were actually targeting for the trades to find out if there's things we can do differently before we pursue some of our other industries that we're looking to target next.
Okay, if that's helpful. I mean, I think it is important to observe that we wish to spend the council's money locally, insofar as we possibly can. I guess that there is perhaps something that we can do in terms of engaging with businesses to explain to them that that is something we wish to try to achieve, and it's really important to try and get to these things if they possibly can, because it will, in all likelihood, be to their own benefit as well. Okay, Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. I don't need the answers here. I'm happy to get them offline. It's really in relation to the meat contracts and how we actually procure that and the scope of the tender. Are we looking at ethically sourced products, country of origin, buying local, obviously, and whether it's non-stunned or stunned halal? As I say, I'm not looking for answers today, but I'd just like to get an understanding of how we procure meat.
I suspect they may have to be provided subsequent to the meeting, unless you happen to have the information to hand.
I don't have the specific details, but absolutely when we are procuring the meat, and actually we've just recently produced a catering procurement strategy, and within that it is looking at country of origin, how we support the local provenance, and even where we are utilising national contracts. For example, at the moment we utilise breaks for our groceries. We've been doing a lot of work with them to actually try and get them to ensure that they're utilising the local supply chain and manufacturers within our region, and that's things that factor into all of our tender processes for all of our food products, but specifically meat as well. And we've been having discussions with Scotland Excel, the national provider, around how we can actually get our local manufacturers involved in some of the national frozen meat contracts as well. So they've actually restructured the way that they actually procure for frozen meats as well, to try and bring in manufacturers as opposed to just having your sort of big breaks, etc., that are providing that. So it is taken into account. I can give you the specifics that we're mandating if that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just maybe a little bit more on, in terms of future reporting, I noticed there's a kind of infographic at the back in terms of the procurement quarterly updates. And obviously through the likes of Scotland Excel, there's a lot of work being done in terms of representing community benefits through procurement. So it'd probably be helpful, I think, for this council to be able to see the additional benefits that procurement can bring in terms of the likes of companies offering recruitment and modern apprenticeships, work experience for school children, the sort of peripheral benefits to actually awarding a contract. Is that something we'd be likely to see as part of a regular report?
Karen?
Okay. Previously, we put forward a sustainable procurement policy that was adopted earlier this year by the council, and I'm currently developing the guidance. And then specifically for community benefits, there's a regional community benefit forum which will take place at the university in the first week of December. So my intention is to actually consult with that group in terms of how we will actually approach community benefits in a consistent manner, and actually try and secure additional community benefits to those that are already being secured. I think we're already doing a lot of good work in relation to securing community benefits specifically on some of our big works contracts. We're looking to see how we can actually continue to develop that. But in terms of capturing that information and reporting, the council has recently set up a community benefit forum. So I think that will be the avenue to actually gather this information. At the moment, it's not information we gather, but following the regional forum, I'm in discussion at the moment with our local community benefit forum so that we can actually start to gather that information, and absolutely will be something that will start to appear in future regular update reports.
Happy with that. On the same point, Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, just on the same point, it's in relation to the tender documents that go out. Is there a specific question within there on what socioeconomic benefits, a contract award would they be willing to do within the region?
What we do for all of our quality criteria, we work it up based on the actual contract itself. So the draft guidance that I've got at the moment will have questions that will be built in, but they'll be tailored specifically to something that genuinely could be delivered, so that we're not asking, for example, for modern apprenticeships or a sort of a meat contract, for example. So we're making sure that the things that are actually tangible outcomes that can be monitored and we can track the delivery of. But up until now, we have predominantly built those types of questions into our work contracts. So we have got a standard set of questions, but it is specific.
That's helpful. Councillor Dryber, you were next.
Thanks very much, and I agree with everything you said about keeping everything local. And I'm just looking at the KPI table at the bottom of page 81, where it says numbers of contract awarded to local SMEs. The final financial year target was 100, and the year-to-date achievement's 198. So I'm challenging the officer to say, are our targets maybe need to be squeezed up a bit?
Karen?
Yeah. Absolutely. I think the target of 100 was based on last financial year's achievements, and so we'd actually secured around about 70 last year, so we did actually increase that target when it was set. Obviously, we've just started to build up the monitoring, so it's been quite difficult in terms of ascertaining a baseline, so completely take on board the feedback as to how challenging perhaps the original target was. But actually, I do think there's been a lot of work. Obviously, we're referring to some of the supplying, there's the mandatory requirement now for quick quotes to involve local suppliers. We've been hosting events and things, so I think perhaps some of the work that we have done has also resulted in us meeting that target at an early stage and obviously surpassing it by almost 100%, but absolutely take on board the fact that we need to forecast perhaps a bit better for next year in terms of targets.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maitland, and then I think Councillor Giusti, you wanted to come back, is that right? Councillor Maitland. It's been covered. Councillor Giusti.
Thanks, Chair. My question was a little quick kind of ward question that's mentioned in the report. It perhaps would be better offline. However, I'll ask it now because Councillor Surtees would probably be very interested. I'm looking for more information into page 80, where a training event was provided for the introduction to working with the public sector. Is there any kind of reason that you can imagine why it wasn't taken up so well by the businesses in Sederunt?
Okay, thank you. Karen?
That was one of the events that's hosted by Supplier Development Programme, so I've not had any specific details. It's certainly the Supplier Development Programme run a series of events across the region, including in the west of the region, which has had mixed attendance levels over a number of years. So I can certainly take it as an action to find out a bit more in terms of if we've got any specific feedback, and again linking it into the earlier discussions around how do we make sure we get suppliers attending these events when we are hosting them. There's probably a bit around how we kind of try and do some wider engagement to find out, are we promoting them in the right places, and how else could we actually communicate where these events are taking place to try and encourage attendance.
I think that would be helpful, thank you. Councillor Surtees.
It was the same question, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm referring to the Index 1, or Appendix 1, sorry, and thanks for the information, but information usually brings more questions. It would be really helpful if next time that comes forward, if we would actually put the service committees that they apply to, because I'm looking, for example, there's at least 4 separate tenders for domestic abuse which involve women. There's at least 6 training or training type tenders. Is there an opportunity here for cross departmental liaison to make sure that we're only using one contract when we don't have to use 4, for example? The knock-on effects. And I don't obviously expect that today, Karen, but if you could maybe fill in the blanks for us at some stage.
Happy to take that on board for future reports and present it in that manner. In relation to if we've got a number of contracts in different areas, that is something that we do pick up. And so for every contract we're looking at, we do look at all the spend across the council and with other public sector organisations, with that organisation, whilst we're informing actually what our contracting strategy and what that future contract should look like. So we do a review as opposed to just doing an automatic renewal as well, but happy to take on board the comments and update for future for future reports.
Okay, members, any other questions? Lee?
Just a little question. The KPIs on page 81 don't always match with the ones in the graphic. And I was wondering if there was any explanation as to why that was.
Yeah, there's one that doesn't, and apologies, that's just a typing error in the graph that I'll be updating.
So the KPIs on page 81 are the correct KPIs?
Yes, yeah.
Well spotted. Okay, members, we'll go to the recommendations. Are we content to note the update? And we are. Thank you. Okay, item 10, Corporate Services Revenue Monitoring Report 2017-18. This report gives members an overview of the financial performance of corporate services for the period to 30th September 2017. Pleased to note the improving projected budget position for the Directorate and the indication that with continued support of staff and clear direction from senior officers, the Directorate will deliver a balanced budget. Beg your pardon, Gillian is here to answer any questions arising from the report. Please forgive the senior moment. Members, have we any questions? Councillor Maitland.
Well, just in terms of presentation, I mean, I must admit, as I quickly whizzed through these reports, I looked at, oh, good, break even. And then actually I look above it and it said, oh, measures to be identified, £88,000. It's just a question of presentation, but I must admit, first looking at it, I would not have taken a second look at it because it says break even. Splendid. But actually, if you actually look at it, it's not break even at the moment. It's £88,000. It's a question of how it's presented.
I don't believe the format has been changed. Certainly haven't so requested. Can we just clarify that?
Yeah, it is a standard form of reporting across all services, that where we envisage, we like to highlight where there are pressures currently being envisaged by the service, but we recognise that throughout the year, once we've highlighted those pressures, they take steps to bring that back down. And so, given the level of overspend that is projected, we are more than comfortable that that will be brought back into a balanced budget position by the end of the year. Only where we view that that will not be the case, like in the circumstances with EEI, do we then present an overspend position. But where we're comfortable that measures will be taken, we bring it back down to a balanced budget.
Okay. Councillor Carruthers.
I think it's gone about 4 years, maybe 5 years now. It used to be presented as an overspend. Then the culture changed and it was put forward as a break-even when a different administration came into power at that time. But I mean, I think it's a relevant point, 88k in the larger figures, and as Gillian's already said, it's maybe not a massive figure, but even an indication of where that's coming. Because that might well have been a post, it might mean whatever, a kind of better way of heating bill, whatever it may be. We've got no indication whatsoever. Maybe we have got the confidence that I would say that it will be achieved because the figures being described, but it is a wee bit misleading.
Do you know, there were so many changes of administration at that point, I can't quite remember who brought in what. And I was in the room. Do you wish to clarify anything on that?
Thanks. Councillor Carruthers, I mean, the corporate services budget has two main elements. One's the corporate and democratic core, which is the cost of the council itself, and members will understand that. And the rest is the corporate service delivery, which about 75% relates to our staffing. So we start the year with pressure, we start the year with a very tight budget, and we manage that as a collective across all the services to make sure that we meet our budget. So we start and we work our way down from the start of the year. So I appreciate the concerns over presentation, but we do start with pressure and we have to manage that very tightly. And we're confident that we'll bring that down to break even for the end of the year.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson.
No, it's been explained. I think I think the graph's quite simple. It's got current position, which we are 88. There's no denying that. The measures to be identified is 88, and the last one is a forecast. It's not an actual saying that we are breaking even. So,
absolutely. Any other members? Councillor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It was just in terms of the income pressure for licensing, and it was just to maybe understand that a little bit better, because obviously that's an assumed or an anticipated income.
Okay, Gillian?
Yeah, what we've identified is that the income levels across licensing have continued to be the same level or more or less within the same parameters over the last few years. However, the budgeted target is higher than that level of income, and so we're looking at options at the moment as to how we can realign that budget on an ongoing basis to bring it back in.
Okay, any other questions or comments? In that case, we'll turn to recommendations. Are we content to note 2.1 through 2.4? Okay. Thank you, Gillian, and again, my apologies for the slight senior moment. Item 11 is the Director's end-of-year assessment of business plan performance, corporate services 2017-18. This provides members with the mid-year progress report on corporate services current business plan to March 2018. Members will be aware that following the agreement of the Council plan, all Directorate business plans will be fully reviewed for 2018-19 onwards, and that new plans will fully incorporate the actions agreed within the Council plan. And new plans will be brought forward for our consideration early in the new year. So amongst other things, this report provides detailed information on the Directorate's performance in relation to health and safety. In overall terms, the current business plan contains a range of performance indicators and projects contributing to delivery of the Council's priorities and commitments, with the majority of these met and or within acceptable limits. Details of areas where performance targets have not been met are contained within the exception reports at Appendices 2 and 3. Appendix 1 also provides a summary of the performance in health and safety, and I'm pleased to note 100% of those activities are either complete or on target. Lorna and our team are here to answer any questions on the report. Unless there's anything specific you would wish to add, I'll open this to members' questions. Councillor McClelland.
Point 3.7.3, the percentage of invoices sampled and paid within 30 days. I note that there's been an improvement of 4.1%, and it was previously an exception report had been issued. That improvement is quite significant, but it still falls short of the mark and the target. And our suppliers, the people that are putting invoices into us, they're absolutely dependent on prompt payment, and the impact that we can have on local businesses and suppliers is extremely influential on their ability to survive. So I'm looking for confidence that we can maintain this improvement and get to the target and beyond.
Okay, thank you for the question. Karen, would you like to take that one?
We've actually just launched a purchase to pay transformation project to actually review all of our ordering and payment systems, and we do recognise in some of our systems are actually performing better than others, which does have an impact on the target itself. So the review stage is currently underway at the moment, and we're going to come forward with some recommendations to make sure that we're genuinely tracking our true performance indicators and making all the improvements that are needed to actually make sure we are paying our suppliers within the 30 days and quicker where possible.
Okay, thanks for that. Happy with that answer? Okay, Councillor McGregor.
Yeah, it's just picking up on the same point. Are we looking at any patterns in the nature of businesses that don't get paid timiously? Is it small contracts, large contracts? I think it's better to understand why they're not being paid, and maybe there's deeper reasons for that as well. And the nature of the business might be a factor. Are they invoicing us in time? That's information we don't have, so there could be a reason why we're not meeting that other 4%, but it would be interesting to understand why we're not.
Karen, can you provide any further detail at this point?
These are things that we are trying to pick up through the detailed review that we're undertaking. However, the information to date does suggest that it relates to specific business processes in some areas and our actual system performance, as I mentioned earlier. So some of our systems do genuinely perform better than others, and some of the integrations to our final payment system, Integra, as well. So we're actually in discussions as well with each of our payment system suppliers to look at how we can build better integrations to actually speed up that process. So I don't think there's anything specific around particular suppliers or trades. It does seem to be related to specific business process and systems to date, but that'll be finalised through the review.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks very much, Chair. And we see this percentage of staff who've completed an annual performance development review in all of the committees that we actually go to, and I think when you look at the percentage of sickness absence, there's a correlation between the sort of two. And I understand that there's action plans in place to try and improve the opportunities to have PDRs of staff, and sometimes it's maybe only a member of staff is only working for 7 hours a week or 4 hours a week and things like that. But I think it's really important to get these done as quickly as possible, because I think one will have a positive effect on the other, because staff know actually what their intended purpose is, and they are, of course, the best asset that we have. So I'm just wondering what else is actually in place to try and help those line managers do the PDRs as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Absolutely agree with you, Councillor. It's an important resource, and we need to engage with them on a regular basis. I think we're currently looking at a refresh to the PDR process, which is linked to one-to-ones, regular contact. It's not just about once a year or twice a year having contact with somebody. It's about that regular contact throughout the year, and that contributing to a PDR at the end of it. So it's not just a one-off, it's a shock or whatever it is, an actual continuation throughout the year that then contributes to that PDR. Through the staff survey, we asked staff, how often do you communicate with your line manager? And well over 80% of staff came back and said, we have regular contact with our line manager. So the contact is happening, but it's just we need to sort of formalise it better that it contributes towards that PDR process at the end of the year, and that's something we're working on. The workshops and the working group that we have, it's not the usual faces around the table. It's people who have got 50 people to do PDRs to it's different people. It's not just the usual faces, and we're hoping that will help. Actually have a refreshed PDR process that will actually get our figures up.
Okay, if that's helpful. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It was just, I suppose, seeking an assurance really on the exception report for implementing the recommendations of the scrutiny review on procurement. Obviously, this is, I suppose, a moving back of the due date, which has been proposed for us to agree today. I'm conscious that for a number of reasons, which it does sort of explain in the narrative, there's been a number of separate different delays since this was actually set out as a target. And I appreciate there's some information in there, but it's really just that assurance that we don't get into the habit of putting back dates just because something's happened or not happened. And I think it's really just to get that assurance that we're on track now, and this is a firm date that we can actually be assured that we'll stick to, and not having something else happen and we have to move it back again. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Karen, do you want to look? Laura, you want to take that?
Can I maybe make comments? Yes. No, we're not in the habit of changing dates, Councillor Thompson, but I would reflect on the fact that the Council adopted the procurement recommendations from Scrutiny Committee, and officers with goodwill and foresight thought that those dates were achievable. Certainly the work that Karen and her team have done has been considerable. We're starting to see the fruit of that coming through this committee, but some things are not finished. We've been absolutely clear about that, and we want to make sure that that work is complete to satisfy the Council's decisions about those recommendations. And certainly the dates, I think, the extension of 6 months from this date on will be achievable, and that the team have looked at that. And it's a very small resource that we have to do that, so that's part of that work.
And I appreciate there is a lot of work going on, and that's exactly the assurance I was looking for. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. It was that same question as Councillor Driver, but I will take the opportunity and ask it in a different way. I think there's a strong correlation between personal development reviews and productivity, I think, and absent sickness. And I think, to try and put it in the context, how can I best word this? I think the target we've got here is pretty much what we've been adhered to on an annual basis. It never really changes, but we've got a target, so how we're actually performing. So we're a percentage off there. Now, if we're looking at restructures which we're undertaking, we're in the process or finalising, there's a lot of change anticipated over the next few years. So to understand how our staff feel about their future vision how they'll be incorporated with the councils, a lot of redeployment, matching and so on and so forth. If we haven't got a finger in the pulse and didn't understand what our actual best resource in the council is, that we don't really understand where their best skills are, how we actually help them meet them. So it's about having people with the right skills in the right place at the right time and so on and so forth. We're touching that in the next report. I think it's so important that these PDRs are up to speed, and we'll see effects then. If we take them seriously as a council and put that level of resource in, I know it's easy just to think, oh, well, we've got to get on with the day job, but as soon as we have a full understanding and grasp of what our staff are really thinking, I think that the productivity levels will become higher. We'll actually reduce sickness absence and so on and so forth. So I do think, because we're touching this every time, and I'm usually fairly quiet on it, I might speak about it a wee bit, but it's becoming, I think because of the level of changes, I think it's becoming far more important. Councillor Rybers has already touched on it, but I think just to make a point, Chairman, without really, I could ask the question ultimately, do we think the improvement action in regards to this is adequate and appropriate? But I mean, I think we've asked it so many times and it keeps coming back at the same level. I just think from the committee we'll have to reassure the officials or officers that this, as far as the committee is concerned, is important, and Councillor Rybers has already touched on it.
I think it is indeed a very fair point, and without a doubt, the very substantial changes that have happened, and I guess those that are still to come, are something we must be incredibly mindful will have an impact on our staff, and we must take action to mitigate those. It is my impression that that is very clearly understood, I think, by everyone responsible for managing staff. But I also think it's absolutely right that this committee continues to see that as it develops, and we naturally look for improvement in the figures that we're currently getting. But I think you are right to emphasise that if I've understood you rightly, it needs perhaps to be tempered with a degree of realism that we are asking a great deal of our staff across the organisation. I don't know if anyone wishes to add anything to that point. Okay, Councillor Nicholl.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. If you turn to page 113, which is the average number of days lost per all other non-teacher local government employees through sickness absence. I mean, in this whole report, there's a lot of good news stories, but this is one which really bothers me. And having spoken to quite a few members of staff in the recent past, and as Archie Driver quite rightly said, one of our best assets, if not the best asset, is our staff. And I was very surprised and very, very disappointed at the morale of some of the staff that I was speaking to, which it really distressed me. And this is caused, I think, through uncertainty, because we are in a state of flux at the moment financially, as all other councils in Scotland will be, I'm quite sure, where we've all going to have to make massive, massive savings. And it's this uncertainty, because staff realise that one of the ways of making these savings is possibly through employing less people. And it's all this uncertainty, and I really think that this does contribute, undoubtedly, in my mind, to sickness, people taking time off, and causing them mental stress. And we really need to be taking every measure we can to mitigate that. And I hope that our management are taking all this on board as time progresses, because the morale is definitely on the decline at the moment, in my opinion, and having spoken to quite a few members of staff, as I say, in the last week or two.
Thank you for the point. It should be a matter of, I think, continual concern for all of us. We're all collectively responsible. Is there anything that anyone would want to add, I think, particularly as regards how we are trying to address these particular issues? Stuart?
Thank you, Chair. Just to reaffirm the message there that there are very clear links between change processes, financial challenges and staff welfare and resilience. What we're seeing and what we've seen over the past 12 to 18 months is significant improvements and increases in the amount of engagement that happens between managers and staff, and that's both corporately and on the front line. What we're also seeing is that we're reducing our sickness absence, and that's another indicator that we are starting to understand why people might want to be off, why they need to be off, what support they need, and what we need to do to get them back to work. This report shows yet another 8% reduction in sickness absence over the last 6 months, which is a continuing trend that we want to see moving forward. And I think the message that we do from our Human Resources Service is to continue to provide support to services in terms of what they should do by way of engaging with staff and also offering other areas of support through occupational health. And we've seen an increase in spend in occupational health in the last 12 months for areas such as physiotherapy and counselling. And these are obviously really valuable tools in helping people to adjust to working life, but also to cope with working life as well.
Councillor Nicholl, you want to come back?
Just come back to say I appreciate Stuart says there's an 8% improvement, but we're still 19.33% above target.
Noted, and I think we will continue to follow this with a great deal of interest. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to page 106, and it's the top two boxes which relate to percentage of stage 2 complaints. I've queried in the past how we get to the target percentage, and just in relation to those two, it does say it's complaint responses issued within statutory timescales. Now, if the timescales are statutory, presumably that must mean that we should be looking at 100% target. And are we subject to external scrutiny of that if we don't reach that? I'd just like to understand why we only have an 80% target for a statutory timescale, because that would indicate to me it should be a 100% target.
Rona, I think that's one for you.
Yeah, thank you. No, I mean, I think the SPSO, we work very closely with them, and they understand that the complaints that we're having are a lot more complex. So they do have that allowance in their guidelines about, you know, the timescales that they expect. What we're actually trying to do is look at the complaints process that we've got, and a report will be coming back in the new year. We pretty much have a process ourselves that go beyond what is expected by the SPSO. We have a very comprehensive and perhaps a process where there are opportunities to, in some ways, I think, streamline the processes that we have and actually focus on fixing what somebody's complaining about rather than going through the process of it. So we're working on that just now, and I think that will improve the timescales, and the SPSO are very keen to work with us on that.
That's fine, as long as it doesn't leave us open to external sort of scrutiny.
Okay, if you are happy with that. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually pleased that there's a public recognition here, the link between absence and workloads and change and everything else. What's particularly encouraging for me, I think it was Jamie brought in, where we're including sort of routine support supervision sessions, which will then be fed into the PDRs for the members of staff, because there's a subtle difference, and we often don't collate the two, you know, and make sure that they apply to each other, because the support and supervision sessions also then feed back, of course, into the workload management and the reasons for absence at times. So I'm actually pleased to see we're taking a really holistic approach to this, and I think we should be commended for that. I just hope we'll keep working that way, and things should improve if we keep applying the same sort of diligence to the whole problem. So I think it's more a statement than a question I'm putting forward.
Thank you for the comment. Elaine.
Thanks. Just really on the issue of staff morale, I think that we need to acknowledge the good work that staff of this council do, and often very small numbers of people are doing. I think it must be very difficult for staff when there's continuing complaints about the council out on social media or whatever, about what a bad job the council is doing. And I think where members of staff are doing a good job and under a lot of strain, that we need to actually acknowledge that and advertise that you know that the people are working pretty hard for us, and that we do appreciate that. I also wanted to make a comment, actually, on a positive comment here about on the percentage of that 55.3% of the highest 5% of earners amongst council employees are women, excluding teachers. Actually, that's quite a remarkable statistic. I doubt that much of the rest of the public sector can actually reflect that sort of equal opportunity. I think that's a very good role models for other younger female staff who are coming up, who see that the opportunities are actually here in the council to reach the highest levels. And I can only say it's a pity that we don't seem to be able to do a bit better within the chamber, because we're certainly lagging behind the council employees in that sense.
But we are at least doing very well so far as the composition of the top table is concerned. But there is clearly a distance yet to go in that. I do think that it is actually an excellent point that our staff, I think, are very often subject to really ferocious, absolutely unwarranted abuse. Not necessarily individually, but most certainly collectively, particularly online, where even perfectly ordinary complaints become the subject and topic of the most unpleasant comment you could possibly consider. That does not detract from the other very serious issues that we know we must be sensitive about and careful of as we're going through a difficult period so far as the council is concerned. But I think there is a wider issue about public commentary and media commentary about the council in particular, not political commentary about any given administration, but simply commentary about the nature of the council, which I think is entirely unacceptable and must have a really bad effect on our staff. Who on earth would wish to confess that they had worked for Dumfries and Galloway Council when it is the regular butt of all the most unpleasant people you can find on Facebook? That must also have an impact, and it is generally unacceptable. However, having got that off my chest, is there anybody else? Would anyone else like to make comment or ask questions at this point? We'll go to the recommendations. So at 2.1 we've been asked to review, which I think we've done. 2.2, scrutinise, are we content that we have done that too? At 2.3 we're asked to agree the proposed amendments to current business plan projects in Appendix 4. We've not spent a great deal of time on that. Are members content with the amendments? They are basically technical in nature. And at 2.4, to note that the Corporate Services Business Plan for 2018 to 2022 will be brought to members in the new year. Are we content to note that? Councillor Marshall.
Chair, it was just based on your last comment, which I think all members wholeheartedly endorse. But when you look in there, there's one of the KPIs is with regards to complaints. But if you look, the council also has a system where there's compliments, etc., that are recorded as well. But I don't know whether or not it's maybe something for the future so that we can monitor that, because it's very easy for people to criticise, but there is also, people that actually compliment the council, and be interesting to see what those stats are, and maybe we can monitor them and do something proactive and positive about actually encouraging people. That there's a vast majority of people, actually a silent minority, that are quite happy with what the council are doing and appreciate the services. They're less likely to actually do compliment. So I think it's something, you've hit the nail on the head, because when we're talking about the current times, and I don't see them changing, where there's constant flux and change within the council and restructuring, and one of the things is the morale, and anything we can do to improve morale, I think we should be exploring.
That's a really helpful suggestion, actually. I think we will take that and see what we can do with that and reflect that in future reporting. And that would be very helpful indeed. It is nice to know from time to time what we have done right, and I think it is even more important for staff to know that. Okay, are we happy with that? Okay, thank you all very much. We'll move then to item 12. This is the Workforce Strategy 2015 to 2020 update, and the report presents us with an annual update on the delivery of the Council's 5-year workforce strategy over the last year. The update sets out progress with achievements so far and indicates work being progressed in directorates to support effective workforce planning. The significant changes and reductions in our workforce, which in fact we've already been discussing, do make it important that we focus as far as possible on the longer term through development and support for our employees, and very much in line with what we've already been discussing. I welcome the ongoing work that is being undertaken to make sure we can achieve this. Let me also say in particular that I welcome recognition through the recent Carer Scotland Exemplar Award, which was given at the Council. That's recognition of the specific work we've been doing in respect of support and help for carers within our workforce. James McDowell is here to answer any questions on the report, and unless you have anything specific that you would like to add. Okay, we'll open it to members' questions and comments. Councillor Driver.
Thanks very much, Chair. And I'm looking at the appendix at 1.4, best practice improvement, innovation are implemented to or deliver our needs. And in 1.4.1 it talks about benchmarking across a range of organisations. Well, I'm not going to bump my gums here, but I am chair of APSI, and APSI is not included in any of the benchmarking organisation. James knows about APSI, he's been involved in APSI, and he hasn't included APSI in it. So come on, James, get it in.
Through you,
respond to that?
It was a wee test and you've passed, Councillor.
Good answer. Councillor Campbell.
Yes, I would just like to congratulate Councillor Driver for his chutzpah and stealing my question. Thank you.
And we must be getting near to lunchtime. Councillor Carruthers.
Chairman, I mean, we're 2 years into this plan, so I mean, some of what I'd like to say I probably spoke about earlier. And I mean, the plan indicates when you read through it, you think, yes, well, this is likelihood is it'll achieve. But going back to the point, there's a lot of changes happened to the council, happened within the council. In the next 3 years, I think I've got to be probably 3 of the most difficult years we still have to face up to as a council. 3.1 tells us about having the right people in the right place at the right time, with the right skill set, qualifications, so on and so forth. Going back to some of the comments I made earlier, I think it's absolutely right that we do have that, and that is a strong focus. And so what's being reflected in here isn't what I'm hearing on the ground, and that's the difficulty I have with this. So, I mean, read the report, take on board comments that I said earlier. It's because the level of change is what I mean. The level of change is an unsettlement. Not everybody's unhappy, and I wouldn't say that by any means, but there's certainly an unsettlement within some of the directorates. It's some more than others, I would say, that are just unhappy and uncontent with the way they feel they're being treated, the way we're reshaping, the transformation going ahead. It's a lack of progress. Absolutely is a lack of process. Communications. So there's a raft of things that we're hearing and feeling on the ground. I just don't know if it's got 3 years left. I don't know if it takes into account the next 3 very difficult years that we have in front of us. I don't know if it's fit for purpose, without being overly critical by any means. One of the things I did pick up on top of page 126, on top of what I'm saying there, we did a survey and we got a 24% return. Don't know if that's adequate, Chairman. I think maybe we should be looking for a, because again, what where we're at this moment in time and the difficulties the council's facing up to, I think we need to be achieving a higher level of success, 50, 75, 80% even. Then we've got a clearer understanding as members what our staff are thinking. Usually the best ideas when it comes to improvements, efficiencies, so on and so forth, come from our staff, because they're working right at the heart of delivering the services for us. So when it comes to the actual recommendations, I don't know if I've got anything to change, but I think the next 3 years have got to be very difficult. It's 3 years left in this. I've got a very watchful eye, and I think our group is actually, as a whole, in regards to whether this will actually deliver the tough times for our staff, the tough times that we're actually up against.
Okay. Thank you for the question. I think we're looking at feedback and engagement. I mean, maybe we could address those points.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Yeah, I think just picking up on the points there, I think engagement is so important as we go forward, and I think that's why there's a programme there of involving and engaging our staff. On the staff survey, that was for a month at 24%, so it increased from an average of about 11% every month. And we took the staff survey on circuit, particularly trying to reach frontline staff. So it was about getting out to the offices, getting out to depots at 7 o'clock in the morning and engaging with staff, getting their thoughts, listening to what they were and collating that information. From there, we're going to have a series of focus groups and then on to engagement sessions with them, just because you're absolutely right, they have the best ideas, and it's about trapping that information and using it as we go forward. So I think the engagement side of it is so important as we go forward, and we're going to keep ramping that up as we move forward as an organisation.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Maitland.
Do you think that if people go into the redeployment pool, they see it as a real positive step, a way forward to a refreshed career? I mean, are we getting that message out that it is actually an opportunity?
Okay.
Through you, Chair, yes. I think that is happening now. That's from experience. I went through DG Transform, got an opportunity out of it. So it is happening, and there's more and more of that as we're going forward. I think historically there's been a sort of bad image towards it, and I think it was about rebranding that. And it is about opportunities for staff. It is about supporting, giving staff coaching, giving staff new development opportunities to then move into something different. And it is happening. I'm an example of that, and it is happening. And it's been a good change and a good shift for the organisation.
Okay, Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. Jamie, I'm just going back again to the staff surveys and stuff. I don't expect an answer today because unless you've got to your fingertips. But I mean, what percentage of staff have actually got regular access to computers? And I know you're trying to use a variety of means here. It would be really interesting for me to find out where the percentage of staff who've got ready access to computer are completing the online surveys or the survey, and the ones who've no got it. What are the barriers to them doing it? And I can understand if it's a piece of paper and they're standing by a roadside and it's pouring with rain, I'd rather have a cup of tea and keep warm situation. And I think that information through time would be really helpful for us. Yeah.
I think through you, Chair, I think when we went out in September to do the staff surveys, I had paper copies of the staff survey in my bag. I took them with me. They're in the bag just in case. I never used one. I never used one in the whole time I was out. I was out for a week, around all the depots, speaking to the staff. Didn't use one bit of paper. It was all electronic. And we used the four-person, we used the supervisors' PCs, we used everything that was in. They're in the depots. Let's go on and use them, give them the time to come in and actually participate in the staff survey. So the legacy of us being out was about allowing staff and raising awareness with staff to say, listen, it's okay to come in, spend 5 minutes at the end of the day or at the start of the day just to do the survey. But as I say, I didn't use one bit of paper, which I was surprised at. That's why I took them. I thought I'll take them with me. Didn't use one bit of paper. So it was all electronic.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. It is quite an encouraging improvement to get 24% responding to the survey, but sometimes you wonder that these surveys, were the comments coming back positive or were they largely negative? Because as we've highlighted before from the Chair about the issue with Facebook comments, it's quite often very easy to get negative comments and not quite so easy to get positive ones. Also, the structure of a lot of the organisation, does it encourage managers to have day-to-day contact with staff at on the front line? Because that's always a very effective way to get comment. Also, the key to this seems to come back to I feel like this is a point that keeps getting laboured, but the PDR seems to be the key to this, and again, we're still stuck at this 75% level, so I think it is imperative that we speed up progress to make sure this happens all the time. Also, when we have the right people in the right place at the right time with the right skills, having 200 people doing a job that they don't want to do anymore doesn't really sound like the right people in the right place. Might have the right skills, but maybe not the right people. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Anything you wish to pick up from those? Okay, that's fine. Any other member? So in that case, we'll move to recommendations. 2.1, I think we have reviewed. At 2.2, we contend to note the aspects of the strategy which will continue as detailed at paragraphs 3.1 to 3.8. Councillor Carruthers.
Just a procedural point in regards to when we see this back. Taking into consideration some of the comments I made earlier, I think we should be making sure that we see this back, and especially once we've seen what the budget is. We're talking about over the next 3 to 5 years, some of £70+ million worth of cuts coming towards this council. That can mean anything up to 1,000 jobs, potentially. So this is serious stuff. So I think we need to see this certainly early part, if not long after the next financial year, to get a fuller update. Make sure it's still fit for purpose, Chairman.
Okay, Lorna, you want to come in on that point?
The business plans that will come forward for directorates reflecting the council plan and also any budget decisions members take We'll also have full workforce plans. Members will recall the council plan also set out workforce needs assessment across the council. So there's been a considerable amount of work done already around needs, but obviously the budget that's set by the council will also shape some of that too. So those will be included. So there'll be detailed information for each directorate brought forward for members as part of those plans to examine and scrutinise and ultimately agree. But also James and I will take back with Paul Clark and whether a further strategic report across the council following that is brought back to this committee after the business plans are agreed. If that's helpful, because it's been on an annual basis, but possibly something before summer next year following all those decisions being made, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Chair. That would certainly satisfy me, Chairman.
Okay, I think that would be helpful given the cross-party concern and focus I think there's been on these particular issues. We obviously need to make sure that such a report is timed so that it has meaningful information for us, given that we will also be looking at new and I suspect in some cases really quite different directorate business plans. But let's see what we can do to accommodate the very appropriate interest the committee has in this area of activity. So I'll take it then that we are happy to note at 2.2. Okay, thank you very much. Item 13 is the proposed community asset transfer of Stakeford and Summerville Community Centre. This council is committed to empower communities to make the most of their assets and thereby making the most of the talents of the people who live and work in our region. The report presents us with a proposal for a community asset transfer of the Stakeford and Summerville Community Centre in Dumfries to the Glen Arros Church. This church has operated and managed the community centre for over 25 years, and the centre has been available for use as a community centre as well as a place of worship throughout that time. This matter has been considered by the Area Committee on 8th November. We'll receive an update on the committee's considerations at this committee. So I'll invite Darren Burns to update us both on that consideration at the Area Committee and also to answer any questions arising from the report. Darren.
Thank you, Chairman. A simple update following the Ministerial Area Committee on 8th of November that members agreed to recommend to this committee the community asset transfer of the community centre.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. In general terms, I would have no issue with this asset transfer. However, on reviewing the business plan from the Glen Arros Church, it's a faith-based organisation. However, this is a community resource, and I would have expected to see some form of a quality statement to state it quite clearly that this facility, this community facility, would be open to all organisations, even if they're in conflict with the beliefs of this particular group. Is this something that we can place as a condition on the asset transfer? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Darren?
We've had these discussions with the current management committee, which is Glen Arros Church of the community centre. Our discussion has included quality of access and use of the building, and the Glen Arros Church committee is committed to that. It's certainly something that I'll look, maybe to take advice from our legal colleagues in a sense of conclusion of transfer. But certainly it's something we would, if members were keen on to see included, we would look to include what we can.
Okay. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think for me to be reassured, I'd be looking for something in writing from the church organisation to demonstrate that commitment. If this truly is to be a resource for all of the community, it should be reflected in their business plan in terms of respect for equality and diversity. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. Yes, it's sort of slightly carrying on, I suppose, really, from Councillor Campbell's point of view. It's quite obvious that the members of Glen Arros Church, being advisors and committee members, and they say they've been doing it for 25 years, it's clearly a very well-established and well respected arrangement, and seems to have been very successful. I looked at the business project and service on page 154 and was curious to see that the trustees, there are 5 trustees, of which 2 at least are related. Two couples are related, and I then looked for the Constitution to see whether there were any rules about this, because the current trustees clearly there's absolutely no problem, and they've been there for years, and it's all running splendidly. But I take Councillor Campbell's point that what could happen in the future if it was devolved into the hands of a very small number of people. And changed from what it is now. So I'm just wondering if I could have some advice as to exactly how safe this is with respect to the current arrangements.
Okay, Darren, if you can take that, please.
As Councillor Maitland said, Chair, the committee has been in place for many years. It's a small committee, but I think the Glenaris Church is committed to having more people involved in the running and operation of the facility. They are committed to greater community use, and recently met with one of the key community organisations in the Stakeford and Sandside Community Garden Project Association, with regards to that open use, and there was a discussion about a scaled charging policy for greater community use. On a point in the sense of the pastor and the committee, the elders, to appear to be related. Yes, that is the case, and that they follow good practice, that checks and financial procedures are only signed by unrelated members of the executive.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I'd just like to go with the recommendations, and the reasons is, I understand it was questioned a lot at the area committee. It's not exceptional that, people from community centres, people from management committees are related. In fact, the arm's quite a lot in North West Dumfries. So I don't take any exception to, people working on that board being related. Glenaris has been 25 years in the same place. They've worked with people from all faiths and none. I've never seen any exceptions to them coming, being open to any community, or in fact, the communities in the community, they're well respected. So I don't see any issues with that. But if it needs to have something in the, in the form in their business plan, I don't think there'd be any disagreement with that.
Councillor Driver.
Thanks, Chair. I was just looking at the legal status of the organisation. It's a registered charity, it's a SKIO, so therefore they will come under OSCAR regulations, and I would imagine there will be equality policies that they have to have in place. There will be a whole range of other policies that they have to have in place for grants, and also the audit of the SKIO from OSCAR as well. So I have no problem with the thing here, and I think there's some benefit of them actually being in a registered Scottish charitable organisation, because OSCAR will look after that side of things, and they will check their equality policies and that side of things there.
Okay, Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I suppose it's sort of touching on Councillor Dougie Campbell's initial question, which is this is an asset transfer. This isn't a service level agreement. This is actually us saying, there's the asset, you've made a case that to show that you can run it and look after it, but that's a kind of fond farewell type thing. So in terms of writing in conditions and all the rest of it, I know this has been something that we've done with other asset transfers in the past, maybe due to the nature of leases or ownership or title or whatever, but in terms of an asset transfer, I mean, realistically, what type of condition would we be able to, and would it effectively mean that we would end up having to claw back an asset we may not necessarily want, should it be in breach of that?
Okay, Dan.
Thank you, Chairman. I think there is opportunity to write conditions into, to title. But the point could be very that much as you've suggested, that at some point in time you request an asset and an asset you may no longer want. I think my members are suggesting that the committee have been utilising that facility for many, many years. It is our desire to have fewer and better assets in our council. There are no other organisations in the community expressing interest to seek transfer of that facility. It may be in the sense of members are, minded to ensure that we have a written equality statement and future community use of the building before we actually transfer the facility.
Councillor Thompson, you wish to come back?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it was more just maybe how meaningful would any condition, could we reasonably add as a condition should we decide to do so? I think in terms of the conditions of transfer, and how binding is that? Because I think that's, if it's not meaningful, what's the point in doing it, apart from as a symbolic gesture? So I'm just wondering, is there any guidance we could seek at the top table on that?
Okay, Rona, that sounds like one for you.
Okay, thank you. Any condition like that would be binding on the party that's receiving the asset, the first party, so in this case, this charity. If it then were moved on to another party who took ownership, then there would be no binding agreement between us. However, as Councillor Driver has said, you do actually have the protection of Oscar, because Oscar will not let that asset transfer unless it's to another charity that's got a similar purpose and similar aims, etc. So those are your protections that you've got in that case.
Okay.
So does that mean that the purpose would have to be linked to faith?
That would be a decision for Oscar. Oscar look at the main aims and objectives of the charity, and they will take a look at who's willing to take it over and who's in the local area. So that's a decision for them to take, not for us.
Okay, Councillor MacLelland.
Thanks, Chair. Rona, my question was, I think you've partially answered it, but my understanding of scale that's regulated through Oscar is that you have to identify in your constitution and document what happens in the situation where there's dissolution of Glenaris or whatever, and I think you have to identify who the asset transfer would be made to in the event of Glenaris dissolving. And my question was going to be, in the absence of the various appendices that are referred to at the end of the report, as to who the named charity actually was in the event of dissolution of Glenaris.
Okay. Darren, are you able to answer that question?
Thank you, Chairman. Just, I think it's important to remember we're talking about SCIO, Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisations. Glenaris Church is an unincorporated association, but is a recognised Scottish charity. The dissolution clause within the Constitution says that in the events of dissolution, the church, any assets remaining after satisfaction of all debts and liabilities shall not be paid or distributed to members of the church, but shall be given or transferred to a recognised charitable body or bodies having similar objects to those of the church, as the pastors and elders shall decide.
Okay, if that's suitable clarification for you. Councillor Ferguson.
Thanks. A lot's been asked and answered in the time we've come on here, but I've known this organisation as a resident in that area since Glenaris Church was set up. You're absolutely right. It's governed by Oscar. Who are we, right? I would suggest to start going into a process that's very clear, set out in Scots law and Act of Parliament. Everybody who knows that area knows that church has been instrumental in some huge good work across the years, irrespective of who comes to their door. And I don't know what the messed about is. If Ronnie was happy to put that to move the recommendation as a motion, I'm happy to second that straight away.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to take first-time speakers first, and then let other people back in for a second opportunity. So, Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, really, probably a quick way of resolving this, though, is just, I think the issue is with regards to the aims and objectives on page 153, and I think it says in there to continue to seek and to serve the local community and surrounding area in a manner befitting to Jesus Christ. I think just take out that last part, because it's there to serve all the community, and the impression may be given if someone looks at that takes out some of maybe the other faiths. So it's just something with regards to the service level agreement, and when we agree to transfer over, that it's to serve the whole community. That's all we need to do with this one, and that should actually hopefully address the issue that's been raised.
I think, going by the advice from the local members, effectively all we're trying to do is reflect what has actually happened in all the fairly lengthy time that this church has actually operated the community centre. Elaine?
I think there's actually a more general issue. I think it's arisen because this is a religious body, but I think there is maybe a more general issue in terms of community asset transfer. That what reassurance do we have when we transfer an asset to another group, that asset will be available to the whole community, irrespective of their faith or no faith, irrespective of sexual identification or sexual orientation? And how do we actually ensure that in all our community transfers, not just in this one, because I accept what Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Ferguson are saying, that that there's certainly no stain on this particular organisation. Can I also ask another question? Now, looking at the business plan, it seems to be very dependent on tithes and offerings and fundraising and so on, in terms of raising the money to run the centre. If it happened that they were unable to run the centre, that they financially that was difficult for them to continue to do so, what then happens to not that they dissolve, but actually they find that the business plan isn't operating, what then happens to the centre?
Darren?
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think this is certainly an interesting, business plan, and in many ways you're looking at the operation of, we say, community centre facilities. The fact that through collections and tithes, they can be described as, fairly cash rich in the way that they are operating. Many of our community centres business plans are made up of having to identify funding streams to operate year in, year out. So, I think the operation of this facility can be well served in the sense of the income that the Glenaris Church receives and what it continues to forecast to be received. In the event that things go, income streams don't come, I think it's for our officers of the councils to work with any community organisation to help identify what the priorities are of the local community, and that would include, if it was to continue that facility, helping them to identify sources of external funding. I think it's already been said, Chair, once the facility transfers, it's no longer a council facility, but we recognise it's still serving our communities, and we would do our hardest to work with those community organisations and members of the community that want to see the facility continued.
If that is the case, though, what would be, in theory, right, not anything to do with this particular one, but in theory, what would stop an organisation seeking an asset transfer, gaining the asset transfer, and then just flogging it off?
Depending on the nature of the organisation, Chair, in the sense of how it's constituted, sometimes the assets are locked, so in the terms of a community interest company, its assets are locked. There is an element of good faith in the sense of asset transfer, I believe, where what we're doing is we're working with established local community organisations, community organisations that have a local membership, and on many occasions a local organisation that have a track record in running the facility. And I think, as Rona Lewis has said, we can write elements within any transfer, but the legal advice there perhaps is that only binds between the council and the first party.
Okay, so going to second time speakers, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. I think this has been a really good discussion that we're having here, and I think it's important to stress that having raised this particular issue, it's not a reflection on this particular organisation in any way. I think, as Councillor Maitland said, the leader said, that it's a wider issue around asset transfer. And I'm reflecting here on our duties and obligations under the Equalities Act, and reputational damage that could be caused, because at the end of the day, if something, in the unlikely event that something were to arise, that a particular group weren't allowed to use that facility, it will come back to damage the council in terms of it was a council property and we passed it to this organisation. And to my mind, this can be put to bed by a simple statement saying that this organisation respects equality and diversity. The principles are I don't know if they are required to comply with the Equalities Act. Maybe get some clarification on that. But I think this is something that perhaps should be reflected in any similar type asset transfer, because we have got an obligation and to dispose of our properties in a sensible way. And I think the reputational issue could come back to bite us if we're not careful about this.
Okay, thank you for the comment. We can have clarification on whether what's being suggested there is actually something that is possible for us to do.
I think it seems an easy fix in the sense of having that written statement as a remark that was made earlier, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Nicholson.
I was going to say the same thing. It could be something simple like this facility will be used as an inclusive community facility. Something like that. But it's quite interesting how it wasn't my understanding about asset transfer. I thought if financially a business failed, because this is what it is, it's got a business case as well. So it's run that way. Then if financially it failed, then I was under understanding that the building would then transfer, or is that something that needs to be written in, come back to the council?
Lorna, we're going to bring you in on that.
I think it depends on the nature of the organisation and how they're established. And I think Louise mentioned in previous community asset transfers that depending on the rules, whether it's a charity or a SKIO or other organisation, and also the ability for them to use the facilities to lever external funding. So we work with them on the basis of that. But where we can, we do put in that return to the council if that's possible. I couldn't say particularly for this case, but we do look to that if that's possible, if it doesn't fetter their own ability to raise funds.
Okay, keen to try and give everyone a fair hearing. Councillor Ferguson, is it on that point?
It is actually, and I think it's on the conditions of the thing here. There's two things: is we can't change the constitution of an organisation that's registered with Oscar. Right, that's clear. Right? Only Oscar can allow that. We can't insist on it, right? Because I've just gone through exactly the same process, and it's because it's unincorporated. It's the trustees who are actually personally liable for any debts or anything that come to that organisation. And I think it's good practice when we're selling something or we're going into legal binding agreements. All we need in actual fact is a sentence along the lines of the things under the Equality Act of 2010 as they stand, or subsequent legislation are met. So I'm looking at the lawyer here to say, is that doable? And if it is, it's a sensible solution. But then, once we've got that sensible solution, do we have the means of enforcing it? That's a different question, and take a whole committee just talking about that one. And the other bit I'm kind of worried about here is that, and I take Jane and Dougie's point entirely, is if we're doing asset transfer right, we need to do it right, which seems a silly statement, right? And that should include statements like whoever we're selling it to should be, or transferring it to, should be prepared, or they shouldn't be prepared. They are required to fulfil their obligations under the Equality Act 2010. We don't have to write it in.
Okay, Rona, clarification?
Yeah, it's more a comment that, you know, that you maybe don't want to fetter your discretion, you know, with these sorts of rules, but deal with it on a case-by-case basis, because there may be in the future a religious organisation, maybe of another faith, who actually comes to you and says, we want this building transferred for our purposes and for our worship or whatever. And if we're saying, well, we're only going to transfer things that will be used for the benefit of everyone, that's maybe a restriction that you don't want to make. You maybe want to consider things as they come up individually and make your decisions, because, you know, there's nothing that says in community asset transfer, when you transfer something, it's got to be for the benefit of the whole community. I mean, you might transfer tennis courts and, you know, you're going to say these are for people that play tennis, not for people that play, you know, other sports on those facilities. So, you know, I think we've got to keep our options open, would be my advice.
Okay, appreciate that. Things are getting even more complicated. If it's on that point, Councillor Knight.
Yeah, just on that point. Surely this is a community facility, and they want to run it as a community facility. They're not wanting to run it as a church, you know. So it's a different scenario of that. So that's what it should be, you know, decision based on. It's a community facility, an inclusive community facility, and they want to run it as an inclusive community facility.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that's effectively exactly what Rona is alluding to here. That in this case, that is exactly the situation. If we say that's exactly the situation for every case, we might have to end up doing exceptions to policy at some point in the future. We can't know where asset transfer is going to lead. Councillor Carruthers, you haven't spoken yet on this item. I'll bring you in next.
Thank you. I think what Ron, as you said, is competent and appropriate in regards to describing the legalities of it. I would support Councillor Ferguson Nicholson in regards to what they're proposing and the way to move forward. There may potentially, I think it's already been alluded to in regards to, may potentially be a reason to look at a clawback arrangement in case for some reason the business case doesn't happen over, but it shouldn't be beyond 5 years. As far as I'm concerned, we've got another item of business and we would normally look at up to 5 year clawback. It'd only be I mean, I think as a council we have to get to the point where once we let go. It's gone. It's finished. It's in somebody else's hands. We've done it enough other times in the past, but we have to get into that type of feeling. If it's, in this case, it's for zero, that's it. It is. Other times it'll be for maybe a similar money, but certainly I would support the two local members in that ward. I think it's the best way to go forward, other than we mentioned potentially a clawback, which would be an operational issue.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. I really don't quite know what to do about this one. I mean, I absolutely see that people want to transfer it, and the background is that it should be transferred. But the other part of it is it's the public purse, and if the church, which, as I say, is a very limited number of people who actually control this trust, decide to do something different. I don't know whether Oscar actually protects the public purse from simply selling it. I don't know. I expect not. And I mean, you know, we have got duties as far as the other public is concerned, because the rest of the public would have to cough up if Stakeford and their area said that they needed another hall after this had been sold. So, I mean, we need to think about this. I think I would have been probably much happier had I been able to look at the Constitution, which is supposed to be it's an appendix to the business plan, and it's not here. And I think I would have been much calmer had I actually had the opportunity to look at that and think about it. So I'm wondering whether it's actually safe, and I feel for the local members because they know about it and will be frustrated by this. But I equally well don't know about it, and I just don't know whether this very small number of people is actually an appropriate group to hand over what amounts to quite a substantial asset.
Well, I do sympathise with that. I also look at the track record of 25 years. I mean, I'm not sure I can think of many community organisations that actually can look at 25 years of continuous operation in anything. I mean, community organisations tend to wax and wane over time, go through good times and bad. I mean, this does appear to have been remarkably stable, and does have a very lengthy track record. I think if we're looking at things on a case-by-case basis, that also needs to be weighed in the balance. Councillor Crothers, you've attracted my eye again.
I wonder if we just put the question, Chairman. We haven't had any other proposals. Put the question, get the business done and move on. Thank you.
As ever, you are way ahead of me. Let's go to the recommendations. Councillor Drybrough, you've also wished to ask.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just looking at the process of asset transfer, and the question is absolutely quite right, because one of the bullet points says whether agreeing the request would be likely to reduce inequalities. However, it does say beforehand, you've got to look at the view of local councillors, and councillors will consider a range of factors as well. I think Councillor Campbell was quite right to raise the question whether it will reduce inequalities. I don't think it will, because of the information that we've had from local councillors. This is about one asset, but I think the overall question about asset transfer is another report as opposed to this individual thing, to go with the recommendations, Chair.
I think you raise a fair point. I think there is probably further work here for Communities Committee, actually. From memory, that's where we have looked in most detail at community asset transfer. And I suspect as we go on with more community asset transfers, we will find more things that we have to consider, because they will all be different. And this is a new area of activity for us. I am going to go to the recommendations. I think we've had a good debate. At 2.1, we have considered, I think, in detail. So members, at 2.2, we do have a proposal from Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Ferguson. I think if you could maybe just rehearse what that was for us again, please.
Taking the recommendation.
Okay.
I think there was some question whether we could include an inclusive statement within that, which I don't think, that the Glenaris Church wouldn't be against it.
Okay. Have we have formal words for that, Rona?
I think it's to follow 2.2, but to also ask the organisation for a written statement about their approach to equalities, and that this facility will be open to all. Something along those lines. Yeah. Okay.
Would members be content with that? Councillor Maitland.
I would like to suggest that we defer this proposal because appendices 3 and 4 of the accompanying business plan are missing. Thank you.
Do you have a seconder?
I would like my dissent recorded, please. Thank you.
Okay. With that, we are broadly agreed. Thank you very much. Item 14, I have no other business which I have deemed urgent. We'll move straight to item 15, Local Government Scotland Act 1973. Members, can we agree to adopt a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of section 50A (4)